Hello everyone, Christy here from myscrapbookevolution.com. Today I'll be building a hybrid layout with you. We're working with a kit from One Little Bird Designs. It's called Crazy for You and it's available for sale at the Lily Pad. I've started off by printing 2 5x7 pieces of the paper, and I've also created my own pattern paper. One of the advantages of using a digital scrapbook kit is that you can create your own pattern paper designs. In this case, I've pulled a couple of the flower elements from the kit itself and I've just added them to a blank document in Photoshop. You create a 4x6 size card and you just add the elements, repeating, making sure some go off the edge of the page, and then you can print out your own pattern paper. We're also going to be working with transparencies today. I like transparencies a lot. They're a wonderful way to add a glossy, fresh, bright, new kind of texture to your layout while also creating a lightweight element. So let's just start building the layout. Now you'll notice that I've gone ahead and I've pre-stitched and pre-attached these papers to a matte cardstock. This makes it easier to stitch on portions of your page. Sometimes it's a little difficult to stitch on the full 12 by 12 sheet, and what this also allows me to do is I can then move the elements around my page as I desire until I get the correct positioning. Nothing is affixed directly to the page itself. Machine stitching is a wonderful way in general to add texture to your layouts, but it's especially nice with digital elements. Just adds a more homey type of feel. Now you'll notice that I have 2 of the same picture here. What happened in this case, I took this photo with my tablet of my cats. It was one of those rare moments, and if I had gone to get my good camera, I may have missed it. I've edited them a little bit to try to warm up the picture a bit and try to correct some of the darkness that was in the photo itself. When I printed off the first, it was darker than I desired, so I edited it just a little more and I printed off a second one. But there's no need to waste the original print. I'm just going to layer it behind the newer one. It makes things a little more interesting, and it's a simple way to add layers to your scrapbook page. I'm also using some transparencies here, a couple of these journaling blocks, as design elements. Transparencies can add to the design without adding a lot of weight. Because you can see through the image, they just make things a little more interesting without making the layout feel too heavy. Now I will be able to use a slick writer to add journaling to these little blocks later if I want to. You can also use a permanent marker or StazOn ink to stamp or to write on them. There we go. Now this particular kit did not come with its own alphabet or letters. So I've gone ahead and gotten some from my kit to add to, or from my supplies to add to this particular design. I went ahead and stitched them onto some scrap pieces of transparency. This will sort of help me match to the word art that was available in this particular kit. This kit is supposed to be more of a Valentine's Day kit, but I decided to use it for our cats. The word art reads once in a lifetime, and it's very rare that our 3 cats are sitting all in the same space together. So I can make the kit work for me by choosing certain elements within the kit itself and not using others. You can, when you're working with hybrid kits, add a few dimensional embellishments of your own from your supplies. Take cues from the kit itself. You may not, for example, be able to print a button very easily, but you can find a similar color or similar design button in your supplies that you can use to complement that particular kit. And again, sewing the letters onto the strip, it just helps to match with the word art, but it also allows me to move things around a little bit on the page. I kind of had an idea of where I wanted this title to go when I began working on this layout. But if I hadn't, I could then move the letters around the page, or the words that I've created on these strips, until I got the title in the spot that I wanted it to be. So for the next portion of the layout, we're going to be building some elements that we can use. One of the first things I did was to build this little tag from some of the word art that was available in the kit itself. Now again, it's easy to just print out some of the word art onto a transparency or cardstock using an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. In some cases, for example, this may not have shown up very well or as well as I wanted to over the photo itself, so I've backed it with cardstock. And I've also cut some of the word art apart. You don't have to use it as is. You can cut words or sections out from the elements in the kit, just as you would with your scrapbook supplies, to create the exact embellishment that you want for your particular kit. Now for the next stage, we're going to be building a dimensional flower. You're going to need to create a page with a lot of banners on it. The kit had two particular banners. It had these black banners and it had some yellow polka dot banners. You're going to need them to be in two sizes, one for the larger petals and one for the smaller petals. You'll need 5 of the larger size petals, and you'll need about 10 of the smaller size. And again, I just create these documents with everything that I want on it in Photoshop, and then I save it with the kit so that I can just print them out later if I want to print more of one particular thing. So what I'm going to do off screen is I'm going to finish cutting out the majority of these, and then we'll come back and build the flower together. So I cut out 5 of the larger banners and 10 of the smaller ones. The larger banners are about 1.5 inches in size. The smaller ones are a little under 1 inch. The sizes are approximate, and the size really isn't important. Other than that, you want them to kind of correspond to the size of the circle you're going to use. I've used some punches here. This is a leftover from the center of this circle punch. It leaves these divots in the center, which make it not really as desirable to use on a layout, but for creating flowers it's perfect. And I've also punched a 1.25 inch circle. Again, the size isn't as important as it is that the banner kind of corresponds to the size of the circle itself. So you want it so that it will go over each other. They kind of overlap and go around the circle. Now you could of course make a simple flower by just layering the petals in a circular formation around the central circle there, but I want to add a little more depth and dimension, so I'm going to actually fold these. The first step is to add a little bit of adhesive around the edge of the circle. And then I'm just going to add adhesive to the banner and fold it in half. So this creates kind of a looped petal, And because it is a transparency, they don't always want to stay stuck together. So you're just going to try to stick it as best you can for the moment. Once we get all the petals down, then we'll come back in and make sure they're secured in place and they're not going to pop apart like that. See what I mean? How they keep trying to pop. But you just want to take them and overlap them just a little bit. And again, none of this has to be perfect. If you need to, set a heavy item on them while you're adding your adhesive to the next petal. This one really wants to keep popping. Now there's a couple of ways you can keep them more securely in place on your main circle here. You can use liquid adhesive and then set a heavy object on them and allow them to dry. Or the next method that I'm going to do, I'm going to stitch in a regular circle around the inside of them. So let me go ahead and do that. My sewing machine is off screen and I will be right back. As you can see, the circle here is very irregular. It doesn't really matter. This is sort of a more whimsical, fun flower. It's not going to be biologically correct in any way. If you're concerned about the color of the thread, you can match it to the color of the banner. In this case, I could have used black. But our next step is to take a slightly smaller circle. We're not going to glue it down just yet, but we are going to add petals to it in much the same way. We'll put our adhesive around the edge of the border. But this time I'm going to take some of the flowers and I'm going to leave them open so that this fishtail shows. I'm going to take 5 of them and do that. Now I'll come back in with a little more adhesive. And I'm going to fold these in much the same way as I did the larger petals. So you're just going to take them, fold them in half, and you're going to apply them. You want to make sure you're going to alternate them between the gaps in the little fishtails. Again, you may have the same problem again where the transparency wants to pop itself up. That's okay. We'll come back in and we'll either use liquid glue or stitching to hold them in place. It's okay if part of this white center here shows. We're going to be covering that up with a flower center. Okay, so I've got these down and I will be right back after I stitch them into place. Okay, now I have the second portion of the flower stitched. You may notice that some of the stitching in the center here is a little erratic. My machine wasn't really liking all of the layers of the transparencies and the little bit of glue that was there. If you find that your machine is getting a little gummy from the glue or the adhesive that you used, wipe down the needle with a baby wipe and use a brush to clean out the needle, just in the eye of the needle itself. That's another reason why I stitched the sections separately. If they were all together, they might be too thick for my machine to handle. Stitching them separately also allows me to make them more dimensional. I could simply lay this piece in here and get a very nice flower, and you're seeing that it's actually covering over the irregular stitching from the first section. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a tiny scrap piece of chipboard to the center. And that will work kind of like a pop dot or foam adhesive. And it will kind of just push that center flower up a tiny bit. I'm going to do the same thing in the section where I'm going to add the flower center. And the flower center will cover up most of the irregular stitching. If some of it shows, that's all right. Now I've printed off the flower centers that I want to use. They're the flare badges from the kit itself. When I created them in my Photoshop document, I made sure they were about 1 inch in size, and you can use that by using the rulers and the grids in Photoshop. I did that because I knew I was going to be using a 1-inch punch for part of the center. Now punches don't always like the transparency, so you may need to cut out the transparency by hand. But in order for the center to really show up, I'm going to need 1 circle of white cardstock to go behind it. I'm just going to trim this with scissors and we'll put it in the center. You could easily use buttons, brads, whatever you wanted to create your own unique flower center. I just wanted to use the badge from the kit itself. You just place it on, and if there's any white showing, just gently trim it down. And then you just pop it right onto the center of the flower. And there you have a flower you can use on your layout. So at this point, I can begin putting elements on and moving things around on the layout to get the design I want. Additional items like small buttons or jewels will add just a little bit, and I'll add my journaling. You'll see the completed layout at the end of the video, and you can also see this layout with the article at myscrapbookevolution.com.